There are moments in life that you replay in your mind so many times, they begin to feel like a dream. You ask yourself, did that really happen? Did I imagine it? And the more time passes, the harder it becomes to separate the memory from the hope from the wish from the truth. For me, that moment was the day he walked back through the front door. The day I didn't expect him to come back. I had stopped waiting. That is the first thing you need to understand. I had stopped looking at the driveway. I had stopped listening for his footsteps. I had stopped hoping that the door would open and he would walk in, smelling of sawdust and coffee, carrying a bouquet of wildflowers he had picked from the side of the road, the way he used to when we were young. I had let go. Completely. And that is why, when he came back, it felt like a miracle. Or perhaps a second chance. Or perhaps just the universe reminding me that sometimes the things we release come back to us when we least expect them. His name was William. William was my husband for 41 years. We met when I was 22, fresh out of secretarial school, working at a small insurance office in town. He was 25, a carpenter with calloused hands and a quiet laugh that made me feel safe. We married in the spring, in a church with stained glass windows that turned the sunlight into colors. I wore a white dress that my mother had sewn for me. He wore a blue suit that was a little too big in the shoulders. We were young. We were in love. And we thought that love would be enough to carry us through anything. For a long time, it was. We had 2 children, a son named Daniel and a daughter named Ruth. We built a life together. We bought a small house with a porch, and William built a swing for it with his own hands. We planted a garden. We raised chickens in the backyard. We had Sunday dinners with pot roast and mashed potatoes, and William would tell stories about his childhood on the farm, making the children laugh until milk came out of their noses. But life has a way of changing things. Slowly, quietly, like water wearing down a stone. You don't notice it happening. One day you look at the person beside you, and you realize you don't know them the way you used to. Or maybe you do know them, but the knowing has become so familiar that it feels like nothing at all. And somewhere in that familiarity, something gets lost. The years passed like seasons. Our children grew up and moved away. Daniel became an engineer in another state. Ruth became a nurse and settled across the country. The house grew quiet, too quiet sometimes. But William and I found our rhythm. We gardened together. He taught me how to sharpen the pruning shears, and I taught him how to can tomatoes. We took walks in the evenings, and he would point out the constellations. Orion, Cassiopeia, the Big Dipper. He said the stars were the only things that never changed, and I believed him. But somewhere along the way, the rhythm began to falter. It wasn't a dramatic thing. There was no fight, no betrayal, no single moment I could point to and say, there. That's when it started. It was more like a slow fading. The way a photograph left in the sun loses its color over time. You don't notice it happening, but one day you look at it, and it's not the same. He started working later. Or maybe he didn't work later, but he stayed in his workshop longer. He would come home from his job as a foreman at the construction site, eat dinner in silence, and then retreat to the garage. He was always fixing something, building something, tinkering with something. I would stand at the kitchen window, washing the dishes, watching the light in the garage window, and I would think, he's right there. He's just right there. But he might as well have been 1,000 miles away. I tried to reach him. I really did. I would bring him a cup of tea in the evenings, and I would stand in the doorway of the garage, watching him work. He would look up, give me a small smile, and say, "Thank you, love." And then he would go back to whatever he was doing. I would stand there for a moment longer, waiting for him to say something else, to ask about my day, to invite me to sit with him. But he didn't. And after a while, I stopped bringing the tea. The silence between us grew. It was not an angry silence. It was not a cold silence. It was an empty silence. The kind of silence that happens when 2 people forget how to talk to each other. We still said the necessary things. Did you pick up the mail? What do you want for dinner? Did Ruth call? But the words were just words. They didn't carry anything beneath them. They were like stones dropped into a deep well, falling without making a sound. I remember one evening, about a month before he left, I was sitting in the living room, knitting a sweater for our grandson. William was in his armchair, reading a book. The fire was crackling in the fireplace. It should have been a cozy scene, a picture of contentment. But I felt so alone. I looked at him, at the familiar curve of his shoulders, the way his glasses sat on his nose, and I thought, who are you? Not because I didn't know him, but because I felt like he didn't know me anymore. And maybe I didn't know him either. I put down my knitting.
William, I said.
He looked up from his book. I wanted to say something important, something that would bridge the distance between us.
But I didn't know how.
The words were there somewhere, but I couldn't find them. So I said the only thing I could think of. Are you happy? He looked at me for a long moment. His eyes were tired. Not the tiredness of a long day, but something deeper. Something that had been there for a long time, that I don't know, he said. And then he went back to his book. That was the last real conversation we had before he left. The week he left, I knew something was off. I couldn't name it, but I could feel it. The way the air feels. Before a storm, heavy, charged, waiting. He was quieter than usual. He would sit at the dinner table, pushing his food around his plate, not eating. He would stare out the window for long stretches, his eyes fixed on something I couldn't see. I asked him if he was feeling all right. He said he was fine. I asked him if something was bothering him. He said nothing was bothering him. But I knew. A woman knows. After 41 years, you learn to read the silences. There was one night, 3 days before he left, that I remember with painful clarity. I woke up in the middle of the night, and his side of the bed was empty. The sheets were cold. I got up and walked through the house, looking for him. I found him in the backyard, sitting on the porch swing, looking up at the sky. The stars were out, bright and cold. He wasn't wearing a coat, even though the night was chilly. I went out and sat beside him. He didn't look at me. He just kept staring at the stars.
William, I said.
It's 3 a.m. Come back to bed. He didn't answer for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was strange. Far away. Do you ever wonder, he said, if you made the right choices? If you took the right path?
I didn't know what to say.
I thought about our life together. The children. The house. The garden. The quiet evenings. It wasn't a grand life, but it was ours. It was the life we had built, stone by stone, year by year, that I don't wonder. I said, this is my life. You are my life. He nodded slowly, but he didn't say anything else. We sat on the swing for a long time, watching the stars, not talking. And when he finally stood up and went back inside, I stayed there for a while longer, trying to understand what had just happened. I didn't understand. I didn't understand that he was saying goodbye. The morning he left, I woke up at 6 as I always did. The sun was just beginning to lighten the sky. I reached for William, and my hand touched empty sheets. I thought maybe he had gone to the kitchen to make coffee. But the house was silent.
Too silent.
I got up and walked through the house. The kitchen was dark. The coffee pot was cold. The back door was unlocked. I went to the garage. His truck was gone. I went back inside, my heart beating faster now, and I opened his closet.
Empty. His clothes were gone.
His suitcase was gone.
His boots were gone.
The only thing left was his old blue jacket, hanging on a hook by the door. The one he wore when he worked in the garden. The one with the torn pocket that I kept meaning to mend. I stood there for a long time, holding that jacket, staring at the empty closet. I didn't cry. I couldn't. There was a numbness that settled over me, a kind of shock that froze everything inside me. I walked back to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. I looked at his pillow. There was no note. No letter.
No explanation.
Just an empty space where he used to be.
I don't know how long I sat there.
Hours, maybe. The sun rose. The house filled with light. The birds sang in the garden. The world went on as if nothing had happened. But for me, everything had changed. The man I had loved for 41 years was gone. And he hadn't even said goodbye. The first months after he left, I existed. I didn't live. I existed. I went through the motions of a life that no longer made sense. I woke up. I made coffee. I watered the garden. I watched television without seeing it. I answered the phone when Ruth called, telling her I was fine, that everything was fine. I didn't tell her the truth. I couldn't. I didn't have the words. I kept expecting him to come back. Every time I heard a car on the road, my heart would jump. Every time the phone rang, I would rush to answer it, hoping it was him. I would lie awake at night, listening for the sound of his truck in the driveway. I would go to the window and look out at the stars, the ones he had taught me to name, and I would whisper to him, "Where are you? Please come home."
But
He didn't come home. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. The seasons changed. The leaves fell. The snow came. The garden slept under a blanket of white. And I learned, slowly, painfully, how to be alone. I started going to the library again. I joined a book club. I made friends with a woman named Eleanor who had lost her husband to cancer 3 years before. She understood. She didn't try to fix me or tell me everything would be all right. She just sat with me. We would have tea together, and she would listen. And sometimes I would cry, and she would hold my hand, and that was enough. I started to heal. Not quickly, not dramatically, but slowly, like a wound that closes from the inside out. There were still bad days, days when the grief would wash over me without warning, when I would find myself standing in the garden, staring at the roses he had planted, tears streaming down my face. But there were good days too. Days when I could laugh at a book, or enjoy the sun on my face, or feel grateful for the life I still had, even without him. I stopped waiting. That was the hardest part and the most important. I stopped listening for his truck. I stopped hoping for a phone call. I stopped expecting him to walk through the door. I let go. Not because I stopped loving him, but because I realized that holding on was destroying me. I had to live. I had to find a way to be whole, not half of something that no longer existed. I packed away his things. Not in anger, but in acceptance. I folded his clothes and put them in boxes. I cleaned out the garage, donating his tools to a young man down the street who was starting out as a carpenter. I replanted the garden, pulling out the weeds that had overtaken it, putting in new flowers, bright ones, cheerful ones. I told myself I was planting a new season, a season of my own. And slowly, I began to feel like myself again. Not the self I had been with William, but a new self. A self that had survived something I never thought I could survive. A self that was stronger, quieter, more at peace. I learned to be alone without being lonely. I learned to enjoy my own company. I learned that I was enough, just as I was, even without him. 2 years passed. 2 years of silence. 2 years of healing. 2 years of learning to let go. And then, on a Tuesday in October, he came back and I didn't expect him to come back that day.
it was a Tuesday.
I remember, because I had just come back from the library with a stack of books. The air was crisp, the way it gets in autumn when the leaves have turned, and the world feels clean and quiet. I was in the kitchen, putting a kettle on for tea, when I heard it.
A car.
In the driveway. I stopped. My hand was on the kettle, but I didn't move. I listened. The engine cut off. A door opened, then closed. Footsteps on the gravel path. Slow, hesitant. My heart was pounding. I could feel it in my chest, in my throat, in my hands. I didn't go to the window. I didn't look. I was afraid. Afraid of being wrong. Afraid of being right. Afraid of what I would see. Then came the knock. 3 knocks.
Soft.
Uncertain. The kind of knock that says, I don't know if I'm welcome here, but I had to try. I stood in the kitchen for a long moment, my hands trembling, my breath caught in my chest. I thought about all the nights I had waited for this knock, all the months I had hoped, all the times I had let go, thinking it would never come. And now it was here,
And I didn't know what to do.
I walked to the front door. My legs felt weak, like they might not carry me. I put my hand on the doorknob. It was cold. I took a deep breath, and I opened the door. He was standing on the porch. William. My William. He was older, thinner. His hair, always gray, was now almost white. His face was lined in ways I didn't remember. But his eyes were the same. That soft brown I had fallen in love with all those years ago. And they were full of tears. Martha, he said. His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it in a long time. I know I have no right to be here. I know I don't deserve to ask you for anything, but I needed to see you. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just looked at him. The man who had been my husband for 41 years. The man who had left without a word. The man who had broken my heart in a way I didn't know a heart could be broken. And now he was standing on my porch, looking at me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. He looked down at his hands. They were shaking. I was lost, he said. I was so lost, Martha. I didn't know who I was anymore. I looked in the mirror, and I didn't recognize the man I saw. And I thought if I left, I could find myself again. I thought I was doing you a favor. I thought you deserved better than a man who didn't know who he was.
He paused.
A tear slipped down his cheek. I traveled, he continued. I went to the mountains. I lived in a small cabin by a lake. I walked in the woods. I sat by the water for hours, just thinking. And the whole time, all I could think about was you. The way you laugh. The way you hum when you're cooking. The way you look at the stars. I missed you every single day, Martha. Every single day. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I know I hurt you, he said. I know I have no right to come back and ask for forgiveness. But I had to come home. I had to see you. I had to tell you.
I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry.
He stopped.
He looked at me, his eyes pleading, and I saw in them the young man I had married. The one who was shy, uncertain, but full of love. The one who had asked me to dance at that spring dance so long ago. I stood there in the doorway, the cold October air seeping into the house, and I felt something shift inside me. Something I had thought was gone forever. Something I had buried deep, where I couldn't feel it anymore. I stepped back. I opened the door wider. Come in, William, I said.
My voice was calm. Steady.
It's cold out here. I just put the kettle on. We sat at the kitchen table for hours. We talked until the tea went cold, and then we made more. We talked about everything and nothing. He told me about the mountains, the cabin by the lake, the long walks he took, the silence he had to sit with. He told me about the darkness that had settled over him, the feeling of being invisible, of being just a shadow in his own life. He told me about the fear that had driven him away. Fear of growing old, fear of being forgotten, fear of the silence that had grown between us and his own inability to break it. And I talked. I told him about the loneliness, the nights I lay awake listening for his truck, the mornings I set 2 plates and then had to put one away. I told him about the anger I had buried, the questions I had asked myself over and over again. What did I do wrong? Why wasn't I enough? I told him about the day I finally let go, the day I stopped waiting and started living. I told him about Eleanor, the book club, the garden I had replanted with flowers that were mine, not ours. We cried together. 2 old people, sitting at a kitchen table in the middle of the night, holding hands across the worn wood, crying for the years we had lost and the love that had somehow survived. He didn't move back in that night. He couldn't. Too much had happened. Too much had changed. But he stayed until dawn, and when the sun came up, we walked out to the garden together and watched it rise. The sky was pink and gold, the first light touching the flowers, touching his face, touching mine. I'm not asking you to take me back, he said, his voice soft. I'm not asking for everything to go back to the way it was. I wanted you to know that I'm here. If you'll have me, in whatever way you want. Looked at him, the man I had loved for 43 years. The man who had broken my heart, and then, piece by piece, helped me put it back together again. Not with grand gestures or apologies, just by being here, by showing up, by finally, after all these years, telling me the truth. I'm not the same woman you left, I said. And you're not the same man. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we can figure out who we are now. Together. Slowly. He smiled. The first real smile I had seen on his face in years. It was tentative, uncertain, but it was there. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. That was 3 years ago. William didn't move back in right away. He rented a small apartment in town, and we started over. We dated like 2 people who had just met. We went to dinner. We took walks. We sat on the porch swing and talked about nothing and everything. We learned each other again. We gave each other space. We gave each other grace. He moved back into the house last spring. He brought his tools back, and he fixed the fence that had fallen down in the backyard. He helped me in the garden, pulling weeds, planting new flowers. We sit on the porch swing in the evenings now, the same swing he built with his own hands 50 years ago, and we watch the stars come out. Orion.
Cassiopeia.
The Big Dipper. He still has his silences. I still have my fears. We are not perfect. We are not the same people we were before he left. But we are here, together. And that is enough. I learned something from all of this. Something I want to share with you. Sometimes the people we love get lost. Not because they stop loving us, but because they stop loving themselves. And sometimes, the only thing we can do is let them go. Not because we want to, but because we have to. Because holding on to someone who is drowning will only pull us under with them. But here is what I also learned. Letting go is not the same as giving up. It is not the same as closing the door. It is making space. Space for them to find their way. Space for you to find yourself. And sometimes, when the time is right, when the healing has happened, when the wounds have become scars, the door opens again. And the person you love walks through. Not the same person who left, but someone new. Someone who has walked through the darkness and come out the other side. I didn't expect him to come back that day. I had stopped waiting. I had stopped hoping. I had let go. And maybe that is why he was able to come back. Because I wasn't holding on so tight anymore. I wasn't demanding answers or explanations. I was just open. Open to whatever came. If there is a lesson in all of this, it is this. Love is not about holding on. It is about holding space. Space for growth. Space for healing. Space for the other person to become who they need to become. And space for you to become who you need to become. And if you are lucky, if you are patient, if you are brave enough to let go when you need to, the people you love will find their way back. Not because you held on, but because you let go. William and I have 3 years now. 3 years of second chances. 3 years of learning to talk, to listen, to be present. 3 years of sitting on the porch swing, watching the stars, knowing that we almost lost everything. And grateful every day that we didn't. The rain has stopped. The sun is setting. And on the porch swing, there are 2 cups of tea, 2 old people, and a sky full of stars. The same stars he taught me to name all those years ago. Orion.
Cassiopeia.
The Big Dipper. He didn't expect to come back that day. I didn't expect him to. But sometimes, the best things in life are the ones we never see coming.